Hi, this is Mrs. Clark, and welcome to my video. I'm going to review how to show our work and how to show the inverse operations when we are solving equations. So I know that's something that lots of people are struggling with. You know, how do I show the work? How do I show the process? Obviously, we have the added concern or struggle with how to show it on the computer. So I'll try to write it the same way that you would write it on the computer. So we're going to practice solving 1- and 2-step equations. And we're focusing on the process here. We're not necessarily focusing on what we get for the answer. Of course, we want the answer to be correct, but we're focusing on how do I get there and how do I show my work. Okay, so I'm going to go through about 8 problems. If I go too quickly for you at any time, feel free to pause, rewind. You can slow down the speed as well of the video if that helps you as well. All right, so a first example, a plus 10 equals negative 10. So what we're going to do is we are going to try to solve for A. Now, a lot of times you can look at the problem and figure out what A is, but we want to focus on showing the inverse operations. Okay? So what we notice is what's happening to A is they're adding 10. So the inverse of adding 10 is subtracting 10. So I'm going to minus 10 here. I'm going to minus 10 here. If I was doing this on the computer, I would just show it just like this. I would put a minus 10 under this 10 and a minus 10 under this negative 10. Right, then you can take your line tool, you can draw a line through 10 and negative 10 to show that they cancel out. And then you're going to bring down your A equals, and then over here you're going to do negative 10 minus 10. So you're going to grab your calculator for that, most likely. And so let's see, we're going to do negative 10. I have to do 10 and make it negative first, and then subtract 10. And I'm going to get negative 20. Okay. So A is equal to negative 20. So the inverse operations, the step I really need to see, a lot of people are just giving the answers. I need to see this step. I need you to show me that you're subtracting 10. You don't need to write it in words, but here is what it is in words. We're subtracting 10 from both sides. So this is a one-step equation because I had to do one inverse operation in order to get to the solution. So this is my final answer. A equals negative 20. We're going to do about 3 more one-step equations, and then we're going to do some two-step equations. So next, what if I have an equation that looks like this? 9b equals negative 36. So if I have 9b equals negative 36, that means this is 9 times b, so I need to do division. The way I show division, if I'm writing it on a piece of paper, I might just show like a fraction like this and do divide by 9 on both sides. If I'm doing it on the computer, I'm going to use that little slash mark by the question mark, and I'm going to show it like this. Divide by 9, divide by 9. All right, so what we're doing is we're dividing both sides by 9. We're doing that because 9b means 9 times b, or 9 multiplied by b, so we have to do division to do the inverse. When I do that, these 9's divide out, and I'm just left with 1b. And when I do it on this side, negative 36 divided by 9 works out to be negative 4. And you can use your calculator for that part. Like, you don't have to know how to do it in your head. The inverse operation that's really important that you show is this step right here. Divide by 9, divide by 9. So that tells me you know what the original problem is doing with the variable, and then you know how to do the inverse of it to solve. All right, third question. Negative 5 plus m equals negative 15. So what's happening to the m is they're adding a negative 5. This one seems a little confusing because I'm adding, so people are automatically thinking, let's subtract. But if I look at the 5, in front of the 5 is a negative sign. So in order to make that 0, I have to add. I have to do the opposite of this sign in front of the 5, not the opposite of what's in between. And so that's weird for this one just because the variable is second. So focus on the number and what sign is between it. When we look back to in this one, it was a plus 10, but it was only plus 10 really thinking because the 10 was a positive 10. So in this case, the 5 is a negative 5, so I'm going to do the inverse, which is to add 5. And I'm going to do it on both sides of the equation, underneath the negative 5 so they cancel out, underneath the negative 15 so that I keep the equation balanced. So here we are adding 5 to both sides. And the reason I'm writing this part on the side is because this is your criterion C. There have been a few times where I've asked you to identify what step we should do next. And so I'm just writing it in words here to help you out. All right, so these would cancel out. I would bring down the m, and I would have m equals negative 15 plus 5, which is negative 10. Again, the inverse operation that's important to show here is plus 5 on both sides. So that is what a lot of you are missing when you're trying to show out your work. All right, let's take a look at number 4. So fourth one-step equation, m over 19 equals negative 10. Now, when I see this fraction, I need to remember that a fraction just means division. And if I'm dividing, that means the inverse I need is to multiply. So what am I dividing? I'm dividing by 19, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 19. And I'm going to show it on both sides. I'm going to show times 19 times 19 on both sides of my equal sign. So what I'm going to do for that is, normally I would just write it like times 19 on the side here if I was writing it on a piece of paper. But because we also have to do it on the computer, use the little star, little asterisk that's up at the top by the number 8, and just do times 19 times 19. We don't want to use an x because an x can be confused with a variable. So this times 19 and this divide by 19 cancel each other out. And I have m equals negative 10 times 19, which in my calculator, negative 10 times 19 is negative 190. And so again, the inverse operation you need to show on both sides of your equation is times 19. So those were 4 quick one-step equations. You notice there was in each one step that I highlighted that was an inverse operation that I did, and then I got to my solution. Some equations, you're only going to need to do one thing. Some equations, you're going to need to do 2 things. So we're also practicing solving 2-step equations. So sometimes you'll have to do 2 things. The way you're going to know you're done is if you have your variable by itself. That's going to tell you that you have your solution. You figured out what the variable is equal to. If I look at an example like this, number 5, 3v minus 4 equals negative 25, there are 2 things happening to the v. There's a 3 in front of it, and there's a negative 4 after it. So I need to focus on the side of the equation that has the variable. So I'm going to focus over here. This one's going to kind of come along, and I'm just going to do different operations to both sides and just kind of tag it along. Okay? I need to focus on the constant, which is this, negative 4, the number that does not have the variable on it. So I'm focusing on the side of the equation where the variable is, but I'm focusing on the number that does not have the variable on it first. Since this is a negative 4, I'm going to do the inverse, and I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So first thing is add 4 to both sides. After I do that, these are going to cancel out. My 3v is going to come down. And negative 25 plus 4 is negative 21. But I'm not done because there's still a number in front of the variable. So the next thing I have to do is I have to get rid of this 3 in front of the variable. We know this means 3 times v. So in order to get rid of that, I have to undo it. I have to do division. So I have to divide both sides by 3. So I'm going to divide by 3, divide by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I get 1v. Negative 21 divided by 3 is negative 7. So v equals negative 7 is my final answer. Notice there were 2 things that I had to undo in order to get the v alone. So there's 2 inverse operations I need to show. I need to show the plus 4, and I need to show the divide by 3. And it's also really important that I show what the equation looks like in between. So you'll notice I rewrote the equation in between here, and that's important that I do as well. So I don't want to just show my original question and my answer. I need to show what's the first thing that I did to both sides, what does my equation look like now, and what's the next thing that I did to both sides, what is my solution. So it's a process of how you kind of uncovered what was happening to the variable to get yourself down to the solution. All right, we got 3 more examples to go. If you feel like you got it, you can always go a little faster and fast forward through the examples and see, maybe try the problem yourself and then check the answer to see if you're doing it correctly. All right, -6 equals -30 plus 2a. So if I'm looking at this one, the a is now on this side. So I'm going to focus on the right side of the equation over here. And I'm going to start with the number that is not attached to the variable. So I'm going to start with this constant term. It's -30. Since it's a -30, I'm going to add 30 to do the inverse. I'm going to do that on both sides of the equal sign. If you like this line here, go ahead and draw that every time you do it. I'm going to shorten my written steps over here, and I'm just going to say add 30. For sake of time. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the math. So -6 plus 30 is 24. That's going to be equal to, well, these are going to cancel out. And the 2a I didn't do anything to, so I'm going to bring that down. It's going to be equal to 2a. I'm not done because I have a 2a instead of an a. So I need to remember that 2 is being multiplied by the a. So I need to divide by that 2 to get it off of the a. So I could do it like this, divide by 2, divide by 2, or like you're going to do it in the computer. If you're typing your work into the computer, divide by 2, divide by 2. Over here, 24 divided by 2 is 12. Over here, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I'm left with just 1a, and there's my solution. A is equal to 12. So I did two inverse operations. This is a two-step problem, a plus 30 on both sides, and a divide by 2 on both sides. And then in between, I rewrote what I had for my equation to kind of show the steps all the way along. That way someone can follow my work very easily. All right, I'm going to do one more two-step equation with a fraction, and then one that has a couple negative signs in it, just to get us solid and in a good place with solving these equations. Okay. So number 7, 3 equals a over 14 plus 2. So a is being divided by 14 and it's adding 2. So I'm going to focus on this constant term first. I'm going to get rid of that or undo it. Since it's a plus 2, I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides. I'm going to do minus 2, minus 2. 3 subtract 2 is 1. 2 minus 2 is 0. Those cancel out. And then I'm left with just a over 14. I'm not done because a is not alone. It's being divided by 14. So if it's being divided, I need to do the inverse, which is multiply by 14 on both sides of my equation. So I'm going to use that little star times 14 times 14. I'm not going to use the x. I don't want it to be confused with another variable. 1 times 14 is 14. Times 14 divided by 14, those cancel out and I get 1, so I'm left with just 1a. A is 14 is my solution. What I did to both sides was first I subtracted 2 on both sides, then I multiplied by 14 on both sides. In between, I rewrote my equation. So we went from a two-step equation, we undid one of the steps, now we have a one-step equation, we undid the last step, now we have our solution. All right, last problem. So the only one thing that's different about this last one, well, there's two things that might make it a little tricky. The variable's on the right, but the last few that we've done, the variable's been on the right. And there's a lot of negative signs in this one, so we can mess up a little bit when that happens because we forget to bring negatives along or know how they interact. All right, so what's happening to the x? It has a -10 in front of it, which is being multiplied, and then it has a -6 after it. So I'm going to focus on the constant term first. Since this is a -6, I'm going to add 6. So 1, add 6 on both sides. And then I'm going to get 140 equals -10x, and those are going to cancel out. Now I notice a lot of people don't like to skip right to this step because they want to show out the 134 plus 6, but if you look at it this way, it's showing that 134 plus 6 equals 140 vertically. So you don't have to write that step out. It's already shown here for you. Okay, and then the last thing I need to do is there's a negative 10 in front of the x, which means it's being multiplied. So in order to get rid of that, I have to divide, and I'm going to divide by a negative 10 because that's what's in front of the x. So I always divide by whatever number is in front of the x. If it's a positive number, divide by that. If it's a negative number, divide by that. I'm going to divide both sides by that negative 10. Okay, and then 140 divided by negative 10 is going to equal negative 14. And that's negative 10 divided by negative 10 is going to be 1. So I'm going to be left with just x. So x equals negative 14 is my solution. First step I did was add 10 on both sides. Then I rewrote my equation. Now I'm down to a shorter, smaller equation. One thing left to do, divide both sides by negative 10, and then there's your solution. So hopefully this video helped you, understand how I want you to show your work. Also gave you a little bit more practice with solving some of these 1- and 2-step problems, so that way when we come back from break, we'll be able to go on to some more difficult problems, or not really more difficult, but just ones with more steps, so things that have more than 2 steps, so we can uncover each step one at a time. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out with anything you need. Thanks for watching.